right, we have 7 o'clock on devices. I'm going to go ahead and call us to order. Welcome to the Monday, April 13th, 2026 regular meeting of the Columbus School District. Before I start, I just want to say congratulations to our 2 board members who recently retained their seat through our local election, and Board of Canvassers confirmed their ongoing service to the board, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Adam, if you would do our roll call.
Majewski.
Present.
O'Brien.
Here.
Olsen-Rappe.
Here.
Pearson.
Here.
Pulver here. Rule.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
All present and accounted for. We have a quorum. Andrea, we were properly noticed.
Yep.
Thank you. Just a reminder to ground our work. The mission of this Columbus School District ensures each student is prepared for future success. I would take a motion to adopt our agenda. I have no adjustments to it that I've been advised of.
So moved.
Second.
I have a first from John Pearson, a second from Corey Olsen-Rappe. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor with an eye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. First item up for board business this evening is our discussion regarding the remaining capital referendum funds. Jake, I'll let you guys take it away and get started.
Yeah, a couple of things here. Just to recap where we were at the last meeting, just a high level, I won't go as in depth. If you recall, we are coming up on the 5-year mark of the 2021 bond. That 5-year mark kind of being a benchmark that you want to spend the money or do something with the money by. So this kind of facilitated some of the conversations. Rewinding back, we've looked over the last 5 years at least 16 sites at a high level, 3 at a little bit more lower level and analysis. And we've ran into obstacles, power lines, floodplains, utilities, and in the end, a land deal is not likely by mid-May. So this led to the conversation of what are the different options that we can do with the remaining referendum funds. As I mentioned, we have about $1 million in referendum funds remaining. Take or give some money just because we set it aside. Eric Cass is here, and we're going to have him take it away in a little bit and be able to answer some questions that the board may have. Really, when it comes down to it, the 5-year mark, not necessarily law, but really it's an area where the IRS starts to get more concerns if there's remaining funds. In the end, we identified really there's 4 different options. 1, we can buy land. That's not likely an option. We could determine that the project is completed and we could defease money. And we could defease all the money, or we could defease part of the money. Or we could implement a strategy where we complete some projects in the scope of the question. And obviously, you could do a combination of the 2. So Eric has ran some projections for us, but I think from a starting point, we want to be sure that everybody was at the same place with that remaining $1 million. And just recap the last meeting. I know it was a board meeting and it's on film, but are there any questions with where we've been from the board? With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Eric just for his introduction. Eric's going to introduce himself, his title, and then the role that his company plays, and then we'll take it away.
Do we go over here?
Yeah, sure, that's good.
Good evening, everyone. As Jake said, my name is Eric Cass. I'm the Director of Public Finance for PMA Securities. We've been engaged by the school district for quite a few years now, kind of leading the financial borrowing side for the referendum, and kind of have been in communication with Beth and now Jake in terms of this 5-year mark, what are some of the options, and look forward to kind of the discussion, and hopefully we can add some value on answering any questions you may have this evening about your options.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate you coming tonight, and we appreciate your expertise. Basically, I think it comes down to we have 2 areas of dialogue tonight. And we've asked Eric through conversation to come and help be our expert from PMA to make sure we kind of understand some of those options. So the 2 areas of dialogue that I think we have tonight that we need to take forward to our next meeting to make a final motion and decision on. One is that $1 million of funds and what to do with it, whether it's defeasance expenditure on project or some combination thereof. And I think the other second piece of dialogue that we want to keep in mind to make a decision on is if we want to direct, if we spend that money on qualifying projects, is the board directing administration to budget for the replacement of that money into Fund 46 for future land purchase? That's been some conversation of, do we want to direct administration to figure out a way to replace those funds over probably several years? So those are kind of the two questions that, as Jake and I kind of rattled down to tonight, that we need to get to the bottom of. So I'm going to let Eric kind of take over and talk a little bit about the defeasance projections that he worked up for us and kind of answer some of the questions that were posed as part of that.
You want to give background on the amounts?
Yeah, so we have 4 different options, and we're going to go in sequential order. And before we go over each option, and please remember that this is a preliminary analysis, so high level. Those of you that have been on the board that have seen these forms before, they can change over time. But this first one that Eric's presenting is just simply the full million, the full remaining funds. So Eric, I'll let you take it away, and it is on the screen behind Eric as well.
Yeah, so I'll just kind of run through it from a structure standpoint real quick. I'm not going to do this on every single one, but what we look at here is your longest term debt. Now, one thing that I will highlight is the school district issued the $30 million in a very low interest rate environment. So you're already very low. You can see that 2% coupons are your high water mark all the way up to 2040. But if you've been on the board for multiple years, we've done the same exact strategy in 23, 24, and 25, where we really target the longest term principal amount. And you can see that as we get over here to the right side, it's reduced down to $515,000. And if you scroll down a little bit, on the lower right, what we calculate is almost $250,000 of interest savings. Now, unfortunately, that does not come back to the general fund. I always like to highlight that. That is purely property tax relief, and it manifests itself in the reduction of the required levy on an annual basis by about $20,000, $19,600. Then you'll see the significant reduction of $990,000 by utilizing $1 million to pay down debt early. That would come by shortening the amortization, almost eliminating 2039-40. The last thing I would highlight is we've already shortened the amortization by 1 year, so this would kind of, like I said, continue that strategy.
And just to clarify, that shortening of the amortization happened with the other 3 years of
Correct.
defeasance that we've already put in place.
Move forward, yep.
Thank you.
And Mike, if you can scroll down to the second. So the second option is around $736,000. So figuring in this type of scenario, we would be quote unquote spending a quarter of the remaining funds and defeasing about 3/4 of the remaining funds. The reason that this amount is being projected is simply because we are confident that we can recode items or projects that were already completed in this fiscal year. And it would amount pretty much to around this amount. So I'll turn that over to you, Eric, as well.
Similar story, obviously less applied to pay down debt early is going to save less, so it's about $173,000, $14,200 per year, and you see the largest amount down there in 2039-40. Instead of about $500,000 remaining, it's about $785,000 remaining. So as we step through all of these, you're going to see savings go down as the dollar amount goes down. So it's kind of a strategy on the use of equity for projects like you've already talked about and highlighted at the start of the meeting versus paying down debt early or a mixture of both.
Mike, if you can scroll. The third option being presented, and obviously all these sheets look the same, is about $655,000. So the way to equate that is we spend as a district on qualifying projects a third, and then we defease about 2/3 of that. And the way that we got to this this figure was we would recode that same amount that was in the $736,000 analysis. But then there's also a couple of projects that we have going or we're planning yet this year that we could also recode in the future yet this fiscal year.
Again, similar, it drops the savings down to $150,000, $12,600 a year, and then your largest amount is again in 2039-40 as we drop that to $865,000 outstanding.
Then Mike, if you keep going down, and this one should be $250,000. So in this scenario, we would be spending about 3/4 on qualifying projects and then defeasing 1/4 of the remaining funds. In this scenario, it's a little bit different. This would extend over projects in the capital plan over future fiscal years. So no longer are we talking just this current fiscal year. There's plenty of projects that are worthwhile to do, but this would go and extend out where we would be spending more on qualifying projects and then defeasing less.
Yeah, some elaborate or expanded comments on this one. Obviously, the savings is much lower, but when we get into an amount like 250, which certainly is an option, we were asked to do the analysis, we may recommend looking at other options, like simply transferring it into Fund 39 to use for future debt payments to manage your levy. The reason I say that is the defeasance has fees of $17,000, and when we start getting down to the 250 or below range, it really becomes, is it economically the right choice to make by executing a defeasance with fees of $17,000 to $20,000 for that small of a dollar amount. So just highlighting that if we go to that direction this evening and the conversation gets to like 300,000 or less, I just wanted to plant that seed that we might be recommending another option of simply transferring the residual balance to Fund 39 for future debt payments and not doing a defeasance and consuming the fees associated with that.
On that mark, is that a possibility for the entire $1 million?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
You are limited in terms of the amount of equity you can carry in your debt service payment reserve by the IRS. It's 1/12 of your next year's principal and interest payment. So it's just something to be aware of. That's why we normally, when we get down to that amount, 300,000, you're right in range for that 1/12. Certainly clients have done it, but technically speaking, the IRS does not like school districts. It's their rules that you're not supposed to have more than 1/12. So I'm required to tell you that, but you would not be the only school district to carry over more than 1/12. I will also tell you that.
And then there's no analysis if we would defease nothing, which means we would be spending on all of the qualifying projects.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding something that was just said. So for this last option you just reviewed, I actually was going to ask the same thing, Julie, of how much could we transfer into Fund 39? So you're saying this is kind of our threshold of the maximum that would be recommended? Am I understanding that correctly? Of what the IRS wants us to carry in that?
Basically, yeah, you're right in that range of a
Okay.
$250,000, right around there.
Okay, thank you.
One other question of clarification. Each of these defeasance projections, in the bottom right-hand corner, there is a box about 2025-26 tertiary aid one-time increase. Can you explain that a little bit, what that means and what the impacts of that are?
Sure. So, I mean, it's very negligible at this point, historically speaking, for the school district. It was way more impactful. But when you execute a defeasance or an early payment of debt, that's considered what's shared cost. So under the eyes of the state, you are spending more in that year because you're paying down debt early. And when you do that and you're what's called positively aided in the state formula, you're able to receive a reimbursement the following year above and beyond what you would have gotten without that additional payment of debt. So for you, unfortunately, using where you were situated last year, it's 1.07%. So it's fairly low for most of these. You've been in the 10 to 15% range, so prior defeasance, if you were to go back and look at the analysis provided, it was a much more meaningful number, but it is a one-year kind of rebate from the state for that additional spending in the form of state aid, which again is not new revenue, it simply decreases the burden on the local property taxes to pay for the general fund and debt service levy.
Would using this for capital projects also count as spending in the eyes of the state?
It would not.
Eric, could I ask you some variations of this in your experience? Do you have other examples of what people have done? I mean, has anybody been like us that couldn't find a piece of property and had extra money?
I think I've had one client that has actually executed a plan to transition what we call bond proceeds or the proceeds from the issuance of the debt into their debt service repayment fund and executed an early payoff of debt. So It is not a very popular approach. A couple of reasons for that. Number one, every story is a little bit different, right? I understand that you guys have a unique scenario with the land purchase and the inability for all of the reasons Jake highlighted at the outset of the meeting. But a lot of times referendums are, they don't come around all that often. So very strategic thinking by most of the clients that we've worked with to identify projects that meet the spirit and intent of the original question approved by the community, because it's really sometimes one of your only chances to utilize those funds for those projects that were approved.
Thank you.
One of the questions that we had, I think most of us know the answer to. Does any of the choices before us impact our operational referendum that is currently in play?
I could not think of any scenario.
No positive or negative
No.
impacts?
I mean, we talked about the debt could have a small aid benefit back to the district, which could lower the tax burden overall of the entire levy, but it's very negligible. Again, that doesn't occur if you spend them on capital projects that were under the scope of the initial question, because that's not an aidable expense. But other than that, there's really nothing I can think of.
What other questions do we have for Eric?
I'm not sure if it's for Eric or maybe for Jake, but if we were trying to set aside some of the funds for a future land purchase, in that Fund 46 that would have to be like replenished, is there any way to like earmark or set those aside? Or could a future board decide to use that money for something else? Like if we're trying to save it for a land purchase, is there really a way to denote that?
I don't know what the legal answer is,
Yeah.
but as far as 46, in my experiences, it would have to be in the capital improvement plan. And
Okay.
anything that's in the capital improvement plan, that money could be
That makes sense.
utilized for.
Okay.
Conversely, though, a future board could approve a change to the capital improvement plan.
Yes. Future administration could bring it in, future board could.
I mean, and just
Yep.
devil's advocate to that is,
Right.
yeah.
If we didn't use part of our 1 million for the projects that we've done this year, the 25, 26, I think it's like 250,000 or whatever, would that just come from that million that we currently have in 46?
Can you ask that again?
There's like the projected 25, 26 projects that I think we've done
Mhm.
already that would fit the scope.
Yep, the 250. No.
If we don't use the 1 million for that, is that just coming out of our regular
Yeah, that's all
Fund
Fund 10.
46?
That's all it's
Or Fund 10?
Yep.
They were budgeted out of Fund
It
10.
was budgeted.
Okay,
yep.
so it would just be like helping to essentially use these funds because it would open up other projects?
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
Other questions?
Not for Eric.
Okay. So I think that brings us kind of then down to the next parts of our conversation, right? Those ultimate decisions. So I think the first one is what we as a board can come to a consensus that we should utilize, or how we should utilize approximately $1 million of remaining referendum funds.
My thought on this is that regardless of what we do, there's not going to be any noticeable tax relief immediately, correct? We're not going to see really anything until 2040.
Correct.
So to me, it seems logical to do some of the long-term projects with that money. And then, of course, then when we can start tapping into Fund 46, maybe we wouldn't use as much out of that. Those projects are going to have to be done anyway, regardless of where we get the money. To have this money, to me, it seems like a prudent way to use it. Like I said, Some of us might not even be here in 2040. You know, to get my money back. But I just think that we're not, I don't, from what the list I saw, I mean, admin didn't go up and pull some great projects that they want, frivolous projects. I mean, they're all really projects that have to be done. And to my way of thinking, since there's no immediate relief for anybody, probably the most immediate relief would be to do those now rather than later.
And we've done defeasances in the past. We've already provided pretty good tax savings for 2039. Like future Columbus district is already, we've done them well. Meanwhile, the referendum was pretty much the voters approved us to help improve the schools. We should improve the schools.
You know, and the other thing, if we would ever get to a point where we had to borrow money for a project, we're never going to be able to borrow money at 1.45 or 2% in the foreseeable future. I mean, this is cheap money. That's my opinion.
Others?
I agree, I think really with what John has said, as I've been reflecting on this as we're talking about all these options. It feels to me that the best use is like you said, the most immediate positive impact we can have with this. And it is, I think, in keeping with what the language of the referendum was. And so I think in doing that, we're providing to the stakeholders what was intended for this money, although it might be slightly different than what we had hoped for in some ways. Yeah, and I think there are a lot of really important projects that could be taken care of, so.
I agree. I think the little tax benefit that there is, even with the state aid in next fiscal year, I don't think it's enough to take away from the projects that still need to be done. And the community expects us to improve our schools, so I would agree with that.
My gut feeling is I wish that we could keep some of it for a future land purchase. Like, I wish we could take $250, or $200,000 and have that be a kind of like seed money for the future, because I do feel like we will need new facilities, like a new footprint at some point. But I don't know the mechanism for doing that really effectively, I guess, based on kind of how the whole process is going. And I do agree that the capital projects would be the best way to spend the bulk of the money.
Yeah, along the same lines, right? A new footprint, maybe not on new land, but a new footprint on the land we already own. That's not within the length of time we have for this money. It's quite a ways out, even if we started today. So, and it's hard to ensure that money gets put there in the future when nobody can tell you what the future's going to be. So, I think it's best to improve what we have.
I feel the projects are the best alternative. Like I've said the previous, I'd love to have a piece of property. And to be honest with you, I'd love to have a piece of property for an athletic complex. But I just don't see that's happening right now.
Eric, if we utilize all of the $1 million towards projects that fit within the scope of the original referendum fund, a couple of things. Jake had commented that would have to happen over more than one fiscal year. Did I understand you correctly?
The replacement would be
The replacement.
over one fiscal year.
But we can effectively utilize that strategy within the time frame that we have available of our 5-year mark, if we utilized all of the $1 million for projects.
think, I don't know all the projects, if you can spend that by May 17th, but also I want to take a small step back. It's not as though some wizard comes in and takes your money if you're right a day after 5 years, right? There's flexibility in there, especially if you have board action and intent to execute a plan to utilize those funds. Now, also, I would say on the other end, that's not to say that you can just wait 18 months to execute that plan, right? There probably needs to be some near-term action to show that the funds are moving towards those projects. But I think you guys are in an okay spot. If you were to move the direction of $1 million and say it maybe takes 3 to 4 months to do roofing projects or whatever they might be, right? You know, you can't snap your fingers and do some of those things, so.
Okay.
But how does that work with the completed projects? Is that already something we could just make a accounting thing, and that would be a quarter of that?
Yep.
Yep.
And a quarter of that, I think to Jake's point, you definitely want to do that within this fiscal year since you executed it to make it clean for your audit.
And Eric, do we want to, is it best to, whatever can get done in this fiscal year, to do it in this
I mean,
fiscal
for bond
year?
proceeds, fiscal years probably matter less than they do for like the general fund that you're reimbursing yourself for, so you have clean books, right? Because they're already isolated. But I think just getting moving on that sooner than later is probably a good thing. If you can get them done before June 30th, that's a perfect world. But I also don't want you to feel like you're backed into a corner that you can't cross over the fiscal year with some small.
But we have a pretty good list already.
We have some ideas.
And along those lines, just thinking about, trying to make sure that we're thinking about all of the consequences, the benefits, sometimes unintended consequences. We do, if we do choose to expend the full $1 million and have to look at how we replenish that over more than one fiscal year, there could potentially be impacts to our fund balance over the next couple of years. Is that correct? I mean, we're going to see a drop in our fund balance in order to pull these $1 million to expend them.
Yeah, whether it be fund balance or our budget.
Right.
You know, and it has to be one or the other.
So there's going to have to be some juggling, and
Yeah.
do we think that will have significant consequences? Will that have any programming impacts that are significant?
I can't give you a 100% answer now.
That's
I mean,
fair.
I think any money that you didn't plan on spending, now the budgeted projects, especially if we would have time over years. But I think on the other hand, the question is, so you build up that $1 million over 3-4 years incrementally. I don't know what it really does, but I think the other thing that we've learned, even in the 4 years that I've been here, or 3 years, or is third or fourth year, the price of land has changed as well. And in 5 years, you're not sure how far $1 million would go as well.
And you're really just speaking towards replacing that $1 million if we earmark it. And I'm more so looking at from the picture of right here now today. We have this $1 million in our general fund. If we go out and spend that $1 million in the next 3 months on these projects, can we anticipate any issues with other aspects of the budget or any
No.
impacts to any other programming?
No, that
Okay,
would be-
because we wouldn't want that unintended consequence, right? Like, hey, okay, now we gotta pull this $1 million to do all of these because that's what the board voted on, and suddenly there's a shortfall here or there or this other programming area for our current student fiscal, programming.
No, I can't picture. That's a good
Okay.
question. I get what you're asking.
Sorry, it wasn't clear the
No,
first time around,
no,
but I
makes
just
sense.
wanted, you think about those like, oh, well, we actually pulled that money, so here's the
Yeah.
flip side of that.
And we're no longer teaching math. No.
Right, well, right.
No, I'm
Like the
kidding.
music program,
Yeah,
sorry,
right.
bye.
No.
Like, that's
No.
not what we, right? Oh, I didn't tell you that's what was gonna
That
go
was
away.
Eric, we're not cutting that.
To
So-
clarify, is that $1 million reflected in our fund balance? Or is that a separate account?
It is in Fund 49 though, not in your like general fund
Right.
balance.
Right. So it would be in our fund balance. It
It
would
is,
be
but it's a
reflected in
completely
general.
separate fund
Yeah.
for the proceeds of the debt issuance, yeah.
Yeah. So what I am hearing consensus-wise is that the board would support a final motion for our next meeting of expending the $1 million of remaining funds from the referenda towards projects that are supported by the original question. Is that an accurate assessment of?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I would anticipate that you guys will probably work, Jake, together to help us with the wording for that so that that's appropriate when we do that board action. And I guess the other piece then, so our second question, unless there's other comments or questions about that piece of it. Okay. So then the second question that we posed is, as Jake was alluding to a minute ago and Martha kind of had some questions towards, do we have interest in the district replacing, if you will, that $1 million in Fund 46 over the next several fiscal years so that there is theoretically an earmarked portion from this board to reserve for a future land purchase? And I guess I'd like to hear thoughts, questions, and opinions about that.
Well, I think we discussed that a little bit. You know, it would be nice to have some money there, but we have no control over future boards or future administrations. Martha's pondering.
I guess I feel if we could replenish the funds, but I guess thinking along the lines of Julie's last question, not at the expense of, you know, I mean, we're running so tight with needing an operational referendum. I don't want to like try to put us in a worse spot just to save money for a future land purchase, but you know, maybe we try to replenish half of it, or
You know-
I don't know exactly how this.
Yeah, because
what's
the other thing to think about, you know, we've got 3 years left on with this referendum money, and then we're going to be back in the same place we were last year.
With the operational referendum
Yeah.
you're referring to.
Yeah.
Right.
So if we require or encourage administration to try to save even $250,000 a year, that's
It's $250,000 that's not going to be used in the general budget.
yeah.
And then we're going to have to go to another referendum to ask, I just,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I struggle with that. I mean, I hear exactly
Yeah,
what you're
I
at.
agree with you.
It's
But I
an
think
original
that-
intent, but it's,
But I think that money could be used for anything once it's in that fund. I mean, we're saying, if we're as a group wanting to set aside money for the future land purchase, we can't force that to be what the money's spent on, right? I mean,
But if it goes
They could
into
use
Fund
it for general
46, it has to be
projects.
used for projects, right?
Capital
right, it would
improvements.
have to be used for capital projects, right. Right.
As opposed to it being used to potentially keeping our district afloat
in
with our
Fund
regular
10,
budget,
Right.
in Fund
which
10
may be
for whatever.
necessary.
Or
Right.
giving them a formula to say you have to move X number of dollars per year, and now suddenly we're going to decrease our fund balance to move funds to Fund 46 to meet
Right.
that
And then
obligation.
our fund balance goes down, and then we're doing short-term borrowing again.
Right,
yeah,
right. I mean,
yeah.
it's a,
So in
Cycle.
Fund 46 right now, I think we said we have around $1 million.
About $1 million.
So that's
Yeah.
where we keep our money for the projects.
Mhm.
So this would
Right.
be supplementing that or using that for a land purchase instead of, is, I guess, the
Yeah, we have about-
question.
Last we
Well-
ran about $1 million.
and here's one of my thoughts, is if we're in a situation in the future in which we're considering a land purchase, I would expect that there is likely a bigger project at play, right? I mean,
Oh, of course.
so we're still talking about, there's no way we're doing that without a referendum in the future. And so, you know, at that point, if you're looking at some sort of referendum that would be additional facilities, then putting a land portion into a referendum ask it would likely be a very small part of that project down the road. Now, small part is, I don't mean to diminish what the cost of land is, but in the reality, if you're gonna build a new high school for $75 million and part of your referendum is $3 million for land purchase, that's a very small portion of a bigger project that would have to go to referendum anyway.
Yeah.
I'd like to say something that probably won't be too popular here, but do we also have to be thinking down the road that maybe we'd be adding on to schools in some way, shape, or form? And not need proper, and I'm not trying to say that's what I want, but I think we have to be looking at, if we're ever gonna be talking about that, our options. And is Columbus School District growing, or where are we at? As we see in the paper last week, I think there's become a challenge to referendum. And I guess I'd love to finish this topic of what we're talking to Eric about, and then maybe be thinking down the road, should we be putting money aside for property? And believe me, I'd want to put aside something. Don't ever get me wrong.
I think even if we're talking about an add-on rather than a new purchase or a new building, that probably is still a referendum involved.
Oh, yeah.
It might be a 20 million referendum instead of a 75, but it's still something that's going to have to go to voters.
Yeah.
And in that case, I think that Julie's point still stands, that we're still going to have to go to, like, we're still going to have to do that. And if there is a land purchase involved, we can still incorporate that into the referendum. So in that case, I think it still holds.
Yeah, and I think if we say, we're gonna put this money aside, right, we're gonna replenish this, and then those funds get used elsewhere, and then we have to go to referendum again, we're facing a community that, we said we were doing this with the money, a different board did something else with the money, and now we're asking for land money again. I think that's where we're in.
I don't think we can do that, really.
Right, so like, I think that's just not in the great eye in the public view, right? So, just for the public perspective, right, if we're going to ever add any more building of any kind, even an addition or another building, we are gonna have to go to referendum. We are going to have to face the question, we already paid for land, where did that money go? So that might be something we would have to address, will be something we have to address now regardless of what we choose.
So to collect it twice, if you will, and then to try and explain that again.
Right,
If
to
it's
collect
not
it
there.
twice without, if we go to put it in a fund and say we're saving it, and then it's not saved next time, we're in a worse spot than if we said, we put it toward this instead. So next time when we go to if we go to referendum, we will ask for land funds. It's just kind of saving face a little bit. Putting some trust in our community.
Because we've taken a lot of potential projects out for bid, and just letting them know we might not be executing just from a timing standpoint. And I mean, it's probably not going to happen, but I want to be sure because I don't want something to happen in the next 3 weeks. If land would suddenly come available, is it my understanding that, yes, still pursue it? I mean, it would be a weird, quick turnaround because we're not taking board action till the next meeting. And as you guys know, I've tried to keep you updated as much as possible. I'm not expecting it happening, but if it would, do we look at the land, or now is it we're just done? If a landowner pursues me, so to
I
speak.
think we should still try to buy the land.
Yeah, I
That
think
was
that-
the
that
first
was-
intention.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
partly why I think we should keep
If
some
something
of the
would just
funds.
all of a sudden fall in your lap.
If the
Yes.
land fairy shows up
Shows up.
tomorrow,
And
says,
I'm telling
"Jake,
you.
It could
here
happen.
it is.
And it's
Yes, I think the board would want to hear about the land.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I mean, it's below 0.001%, but
If the signing day is here for these funds on May 21st, and you get a phone call on the way into the meeting to say, hey, Jake, I might have a lead, we
Yeah.
probably would need to execute the deal and then
Yeah.
evaluate that opportunity.
all right. I just want to be sure. I want to be sure. I thought I knew the answer.
Yeah. So, a little less clear, so I just want to clarify what I'm kind of hearing on a consensus for the question of, do we replenish the $1 million over several fiscal years to earmark for land fund if possible? What I'm hearing is in general, everybody's wanting to say, yes, I'd love to say to do that, but the reality is, no, I don't think that we should do that. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah.
I think the only way that we could do that is if the land purchase was on the improvement plan and we
Right.
decided as a board to put the money towards that.
Yeah.
I would feel better about doing that if we weren't in the middle of an operational referendum.
Yeah.
I
We're already
completely agree.
taking-
Yep.
I think it's
that's
really
what-
hard
where
to
my
say,
mind
hey,
keeps
we're gonna
going.
save some money for this, but by
Yeah.
the way, yeah, I very much struggle with
You know,
that.
and our state funding is all over, you know, who knows where that's gonna end
Yeah,
up.
if,
Okay. So the two things then that will come before us at the final meeting, assuming, and I use that word carefully, that the land ferry does not appear, is that we would like to see a motion to expend the $1 million that was originally intended towards the project on some projects that fall within that scope, and that we would not be expecting administration to be replacing or earmarking funds for that. So I think on that second point, there probably doesn't need to be any board action. There only need to be board action if we were pursuing it. Is that, you agree? Questions, comments, final thoughts? Anything I'm overlooking that we should discuss related to this topic?
Do we need to let the community know what projects we're working on?
I think I would reserve that to our administration to decide if or how or what. I mean, I think one of them is the roof, another section of what, 15 sections of roof at the high school, so that's pretty non-exciting, but I mean,
But
maybe we
necessary.
could take a Facebook post of the roofing truck there.
But I think we always have to note that this is,
Oh,
the
yeah.
land isn't happening, so we are doing this with your money instead.
Yeah, that's a good point as to how to help with that message.
put that in the district email or something.
Or in the newsletter, the monthly
the
newsletter.
And usually something like that, I might even just do, if you recall, when I was kind of talking into the camera, sometimes it was up, sometimes it was down, nose hairs.
Skills.
No, I still have the stand somewhere. I think that might need a message like that
Yeah.
has just a
Great
different
point.
feel for it.
That's
Just
good idea.
itching to make another video again.
Yeah.
There you go, community comment.
Andrea and the wall shared with me doesn't want to hear it because you don't want to know how many takes it took of each one.
Personal
So-
day.
I think that's a really good point though, because I think
I do- you're right,
communicating clearly, we've talked about that from the beginning of this conversation, is like making sure that our community members do understand, the lengths that we're going to look for land,
Yeah.
the position that we're in with this money, and that, we all have really put a great deal of thought into this, into being the most responsible we can with what we frankly told them.
And
we would do
probably
with
in the
that.
long run, and hopefully we'll save them some money.
Right.
And I will reference the board meetings that discussion has taken place.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Eric, we very much
Yeah,
appreciate your
have a
time
good
tonight.
evening.
Thanks for
Thanks,
coming.
Thank you.
All right. Next up on our board business, legislative committee update.
All right, buckle up, everybody. It's been a busy month. I keep getting these busy months. So the first thing to note is that there is a special session happening tomorrow that Governor Evers called for them to hopefully reach an agreement, hopefully, on how to spend the budget surplus that we've been hearing about for a while. They're not really saying a lot about how much the Senate has been involved in any of the negotiating. So we really don't know a lot, I guess, really, about what's going to happen aside from that. There's $2.5 billion in surplus, and there's been ongoing negotiations on how to spend that through property tax relief, school funding, how much would be provided, through what mechanisms would these rebates or credits happen. Yeah, so there is a whole breakdown of where things last stood that I won't go too far into the weeds on. But the governor proposed a total of 1.3 billion to go towards school and school funding. And then the GOP proposed a different breakdown. It's really lengthy. If you want more information, I recommend looking into that on the WASB legislative update page. So we'll see what happens. Recent election last week, there were 75 referendums on the ballots, and 60% of them passed, which was 46 of them. So I think lower than the last time around.
That's typical. It's about the same for spring elections.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay. Another area of interest is that the president did release his federal budget request, which included some large cuts to the Department of Education discretionary funding. I'll be honest, the language here confused me a bit because it said that was decreased by 2.3 billion, but then overall cuts of roughly 6.5 billion, but they didn't specify where the rest of those cuts were taking place very clearly that I could tell. So a lot of cuts. Title I funding would remain the same, as well as IDEA funding to be increased. And then he proposed a new $2 billion block grant called Make Education Great Again, MEGA, to grant flexible funding to states. This would eliminate migrant education, English language acquisition, special programs for migrant students, and teacher quality partnership program. But also, it's good to remember that the appropriations that were requested last year looked really different from what he, or what was initially requested by him looked different than where it ended up. So that's not like a final vote. That will be up to Congress. All right, then we signed a good handful of bills. Act 185 for including DPI, including any license holders who are being investigated by DPI, the outcomes of those investigations, if they had to surrender a license. Act 186, prohibiting employers from entering into confidentiality agreements that would cover like any immoral conduct of an employee. Act 189 bans operating drones over schools without the express authorization of the school board or a designee. SB 391 to allow audiovisual recording devices to be used on buses as long as there is policy adopted by the school board to authorize that use and what it looks like.
Is that referring to the schools operating AV equipment?
I
Isn't that already
believe it
stated?
was district equipment, but I would have to look to be sure. It was specifically through the district on buses.
Yeah, the school board can adopt a policy for authorizing, I think, our own recording devices.
And it would all be confidential and only to be used for like specific uses.
So is it mandating that it has to happen?
No.
Or it's allowed?
No, it's allowing it to.
Yeah.
Okay. I was gonna say, we already have a policy on that. Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. There's kind of Cliff's notes here.
Yep, that's fair. There's a lot.
It's a lot of bills.
Yeah.
Act 95 creates and funds a pilot program for professional development for science teachers, and requiring DEPI to implement that in collaboration with nonprofits. That will be available this and next school year, I think it said. And Act 101 changed the criteria for absence notes to being written from registered nurses, which is using quotes, to advanced practice registered nurses, which is aligning with changes to regulations that were already made earlier in the session. Those were all the bills that were signed. I have a pretty lengthy list of vetoed bills. Do we want a rundown of those things? There's quite a few of them.
Anything significant that we anticipate impacts from?
One SB 389, he vetoed the bill that would have eliminated the 400-year veto, so that's nice. There was a veto to expand eligibility in state choice programs, which would have basically just allowed siblings individuals whose siblings were already in a school choice program wouldn't have to meet all of the designations and criteria. They just be like allowed in, so they vetoed that.
And that was vetoed.
Correct. A dual enrollment council was trying to be passed to like work with the Department of Workforce Development, which was not funded and didn't really provide a clear path on how they'd work together, so he vetoed that. Designating teams as male, female, co-ed, mixed sex based on the biological sex of participating students defined as the sex determined at birth and reflected on the participant's birth certificate was vetoed. Requiring a notarized parental sign-off before a student can change name or pronouns within the school was vetoed. Sorry, there's a lot here. They vetoed a teacher bill of rights was kind of the term that was being used, which was meant to regulate student discipline practices. That was vetoed. I think those are the main ones that I would highlight. Adam, did I miss anything?
Not in terms of, I did want to touch on the statistics with the referenda passages.
Oh, sure.
I did want to, I did want to point out, I think there was a little, like discomfort, there was a lot of people calling out that the 61% approval rate, like that's down, but that is, like I said, that's consistent over the last few years. That's about where it's been. And I've also noticed it holds up what we've seen from the last couple of years, and this may be pertinent to the last agenda items conversation, that capital referenda are consistently more successful than operating referenda, which which sounds weird because it is such a much bigger ask, but 9 out of 12 capital referenda passed, which was 75% approval. Operational referenda had a much lower percentage.
That might be what I was thinking, because I had thought I recalled 75%, so I must have been
Yeah,
thinking of
that's capital. So like pretty much everyone but Baraboo and Sauk and Whitefish Bay this cycle.
Okay, thank you for that update. Takes us into the superintendent's report.
Yeah, sitting on the crowd is Kristen Wilkinson. If you look at the HR report, well, I hope after the B1 that intense conversation on money, and she's still with us. We're making the recommendation for her filling the business manager position starting July 1. She is currently a math teacher in our district with experience. Checked all the boxes that we were looking for administratively. Excellent reference checks, especially as a team player and willing to learn. So we are excited. And hopefully she gets approved, and then we would work on onboarding her in that role. Welcome. With that being said, I'll turn it over to Becky for elementary math textbook and resource adoption.
All right, hopefully this can be pretty short and sweet, but you have a couple just uploads in your Word document coming here tonight. Currently, the elementary school uses a curricular tool for math called Bridges, and we currently have the 2nd edition. That is our approved tool, and we have it in 4K through grade 5 for 2nd edition. This school year, all of the DCS classrooms and then all of grade 1 and grade 5 have been piloting the 3rd edition of Bridges, and things have gone really well with that, and we're bringing it in tonight so that hopefully we can take it to you guys for a vote the 2nd meeting, because to be really honest, we would like to get it approved and purchase said upgrade tools under this year's budget yet, so that maybe our other classrooms can explore a little bit with it for their last unit, and at worst, in case things are delivered late, our teachers can have it for summer to have more time with it, getting ready for next year and for early summer training. and stuff like that. But overall, things have gone really well with the pilot. With the pilot classroom teachers, we did one evening session where the teachers, if they were able to join us, were able to come in and give feedback on kind of the typed up document. You saw kind of their feedback of like pros and concerns. For the staff who weren't able to come in that night, we did like a Google document with the same questions where they had that opportunity to provide feedback. Beth and Mark had the tools out in the elementary office in case any parents wanted to come in and review and provide feedback. Kind of true to form. Maybe, I don't know if parents took a look at anything, but we did not receive any feedback. However, the opportunity was there but things went really well, and this is a very reasonable upgrade, probably the cheapest adoption I'll ever ask you to do for all of those grade levels. So you see a couple different quotes, because one of the quotes, and I think it's the $7,000-ish one, just to explain what you're looking at. The $7,020 quote in there, that is specifically for our classrooms who were not part of the pilot at all. And so you'll notice it's like kindergarten, second, third, and fourth. You'll also see another quote in there that is kind of like random quantities, and that's like one kindergarten, one first, one second, one third, and one fifth. What that quote is for is when we did the pilot, what Math Learning Center did is they gave us those kits as part of the pilot to use, and if we weren't doing this adoption, we would have just sent them back. And so we're instead paying for them, so we keep them. The other classrooms that we did the pilot for, we paid up front because we felt pretty confident this was going to go well. But these are the kits that we were given for the pilot that we don't currently own. And then the third quote that you have in here is really something that is not going under this year's budget. It's more what the student workbooks are going to cost us for next year. But it's just a look at what that actually does cost. And so we had it, and so I threw it in here for what third edition is really going to be, does cost. And that's really more things that are student fees, but it's third edition stuff, so I wanted you to be able to see that. So, does anybody have any questions?
What's the big difference? I know I've seen the list of things that they say are going well and what to consider, but what's the big difference between edition 2 and edition 3? What's the point of the upgrade?
The teachers believed a little more user-friendly in some cases, more culturally responsive, and it could be from, it's not Johnny in the story anymore, it's a different name that might be a little more appropriate. I'm trying to think of some other things that they mentioned.
I think they felt that some of the organization in the third edition made more sense for the time of year.
Okay.
That some of the concepts were being taught. It's just there were little things that they talked about, how different assessments were, maybe pre-assessments were now screeners, and they still have little gripes about the online website. It's one of those things where not everything is perfect, but they're figuring out workarounds with that. But I think they felt that this was a little bit more culturally responsive. They definitely felt like things were aligned. They felt like just some of the unit topics that the language, I think, in some of the presentation that they weren't grandly fond of in second edition, they much prefer in the way third edition presents itself. They like second edition. They just overall like third edition better.
So it's not really a content change. It's not curricular change. It's just the presentation
It's
materials
just
and the
an
organization and the got it.
It's just an upgrade. When we talked about it, I presented to the pilot teachers. I essentially said to them, recommendation would it be to adopt third edition, keep second edition, or look for something totally different. And that was kind of the way. And one teacher said, let's go for something totally outside of Bridges, and everybody else across the board was third edition. And that was just the strong feeling.
How many school years have we utilized the second edition now?
We adopted back, we made the transition in 2020.
Okay.
It,
So
you
we've
know,
got
it did it when we were,
5 years in.
yeah. Well, the district had Bridges, like, before me, like, in this role, and so we, you know, then did everyday math for a while, and then back to Bridges, but,
So the last
Um,
5 years consistently have been second edition.
yeah.
And were there any contracted pieces of second edition, like online licenses or such, where we had a time frame on that we will be like leaving early, or are there any that are going to be carried over? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I know sometimes we have online licenses that have a contracted period or such. So there won't be any loss, if you will, of revenue on the program
No.
with changing from second to third edition. Okay.
And Bridges is, like, different than a lot of things because there's not, like, a student online license.
Yeah, I don't see any in the quotes. It's
Yeah.
all, yeah, okay. Other questions, thoughts? No? Okay, and so we'll see that on the next agenda then for consideration for approval. Okay, great. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone signed up for public comment this evening, Andrea? All right. And in a rare move, we have no donations tonight. All right.
Wow.
So at,
It's over.
right, yeah.
We did well last month.
Tax time this week.
And
All right.
so at the end of the month,
Yeah.
second meeting.
And so at this time, I would ask the board for us to consider adjournment to closed session. Adjourn to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851 subset C for the purpose of considering and taking action as appropriate employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of public employees over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, specifically related to the employment of certified staff members. I would ask Adam to do a roll call vote and remind you that your answer is yes to proceed to closed session or no.
We don't need a motion ahead of that. Ahead of time, we just go straight
Oh, we
to the roll
do.
I'll motion to move to close session.
Second.
I have a first from Karen Smith, a second from Martha Rule. Thank you, Adam, for keeping me on track that way. Roll call vote.
call. Majewski,
Yes.
Yes.
O'Brien, Olson Rappy,
Yes.
Pearson,
Yes.
Culver, yes. Rule,
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
All right, we are moving closed session at 8:02 PM.
Maybe take a stop in the restroom if you need to.
Yeah, that was great.
That's a good idea.
All right, I will take a motion to close adjourned session and reconvene in open session.
So moved.
Second.
I have a first from John Pearson, a second from Karen Smith. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor with an aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We're back in open session at 9:23 PM. Next up on our agenda is the superintendent's consent agenda, including our human resources report tonight. I would take a motion for its approval.
So moved.
Second.
I have a first from Martha Rule, a second from Mike O'Brien. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor with an aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up is our board consent agenda, which has our March 23rd board meeting minutes on it. I'd take a motion for its approval.
Motion to approve March 23rd board meeting minutes.
Second.
I have a first from Karen Smith, a second from Corey Olson Raffy. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor with an aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Just a reminder for our next date that we meet on April 27th. The Governance Committee is going to convene at 6 PM here in this location. I ask the rest of the board to be present by 6:45 PM. We're just going to update our board picture for the next year. And then we will meet as usual at 7 PM for our board meeting.
Sport coat and tie?
Yeah, if you so choose, Mike, absolutely.
It's better than last year.
Oh, you did say governance committee. I lost track. I'm sorry.
I did
I'm
say-
like, did I forget? I thought I forgot to put it
It's
on.
on there.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
good. Opportunity to debrief. I would say that
I feel very briefed.
I feel that we spent more than 50% of our time on kids. That's one of our goals.
Yeah,
so-
definitely.
Yes.
I would agree
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah. All right. That being said, that is the balance of our agenda. I would take a motion for our adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
I have a first from John Pearson, a second from Martha Rule. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor with an eye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned at 9:25 PM. Thank you all. So long.